your airports and some of your sea channels. And the sheik continued with, what many of you do not know is that democracy hasn't handed me this victory but force ? In the United and meeting of the minds beforehand appointments.
Some edits are missing. If it's the same speaker, he's talking in broken English still.
Quote ellipsis me as leader before you today. What I think you know by now is that we take not 3 or 4 airplanes as makeshift missiles to wake America to their senses, but this time we hijack all of your, the ones responsible for conspiring to weaken our nation and very population. We, 1 for 100 of the children, this man here has said, hijack your airports and some of your sea channels and many of your battleground encampments. With a lethal missiles fired from submarine that's insignia logo and its colors painted on tails. Side very much does resemble what I wears across my shoulders and what your children's will not refer to you as Old Glory or national flag. My Iranian general as a young man flourished as a field soldier and then before moved he until later in years makes for quite the decorated admiral in the U.S. Wentworth Navy. And in time for his service hours has he finally been compensated as a true reasons for his commission as dramatically realized. You've all heard of the incident by now. Yes. What's on the horizon behind up ahead? Maybe you ask me as your new national leaders. The riotous activity in your streets must cease quickly before a third nuke missile is sent from off of your California coastlines on the breadbasket of America. Quote. The media reporter, knowing the good graces of hostage life for the past 3+ years from an ocean away, quipped. Her tone incredulous and suffused with hilarity. Quote, a third missile. He says. What about the second? Quote, to which snide the man next to her. Quote, no. I think he said a third missile ellipsis. Quote, he emphasized the word thirds, leaning into it with angular and relished gusto. Quote, ellipsis, so maybe there's hope yet. Quote. The Iranian continued. Quote, only once has hit from offshore out in the sea while your former president outgoing had taken for airborne covers in Air Force One. Or another planes while your elected president incoming quite sensibly stole away. Yes. As if Alistair knew. Yes. The first man knowing that he was in immediate dangers. So yes. I have failed to mention the second's missile that is or will be on order on trajectory course for your nation's breadbasket, but on my order shall my captain, or you know him as decorated lieutenant, reared in Tehran but raised largely in American soil alongside many of yous. He's given the order for and the crew to replicates the New York attacks that's fumes still smell in the air. Secondary to the first successful strikes on Washington, D.C. just 2 days ago. What could prevent you from wreaking further catastrophes on your already distressed homelands? Or ours? Maybe to say? A complete desistance and cessation to the violence against my citizens. Our citizens, representing more than half of the USA population on your continents. Are these idle threats? Maybe you ask? Maybe to ask your president then, or even to ask persons in Tel Aviv and your Vatican in Rome today. It is better to join forces now instead of encouraging bloodsheds and more wars in your document content. Text box multi-line. Line break. Streets. We have enough of that race where I comes from back in the Middle East and in the insurrections, and not only Tehran, Iraq and in Saudi Arabia. Quote, these resistance ideas are inspired by America in Western society ideology and can no longer be tolerated. Is it not evident? Today is a new day for a brave new world and you've lost democratic controls at the helm. Literally. Yes. To remind of danger even without further strike like this on DC. Remember that it is not I that lampooned your Green's huge Lady Liberty to the ground, but it was your own people. And how strange it is that in desperation it should have you brought to comes to the lands of Israel to saves your country and to comes to your any assistance. Of course. Not learning the lessons of history and that you should avoid giving the voids for your enemies to fill that policies inside can renders like the unassailables fortresses. It to fill. Why so? Line break. Because many of your patriots are on carrier boats heading under to join the unjust Israeli campaigns, and with your own fleets have they decided to forego a returns to home as greatest act of war against your new administrations now under Tsar Hussein. Patriots or heroes in the least, but traitors.
He notes that he's on his way to Israel there, and
to
that's
saves
not there for
yourselves
some
then,
reason.
or you get sweeps into the void like ocean wave. Does this
And he
make
says,
sense?
as if,
Again, I pardons the English friends in America. I calls for a total halt in the
that's
violence
definitely
within
noted
3 hours.
in my tablet that they're
Maximum.
on the way to Israel.
And the warnings shot has resulted in maybe
scoffs
1,000
as if
times
they're
more
gonna
the
take care of
calamities than you
America,
experienced
something
in
like
the past
That's
decade
one in
and
there.
even a handfuls of
There's one
decades
back in
ago.
where I had it.
My captain in the USA medaled uniform stands by with his finger on the trigger, so what would behoove yous? Unlike your soldiers on foreign soils outside who even abandon yous to comply, he backwards flipped his hand toward the nearest window to illustrate the words on foreign soils outside. He continued, quote, 3 hours and countings for the second, if not the seconds and thirds trajectory missiles, shall simultaneously be launched to the predetermined destination. The days of America to count only on one hand's then. Suffice me to say, the reporters assembled in the airport lobby and awaiting instructions from people they traveled with, learning that all outgoing flights were postponed indefinitely, yet such was the ordered mandate from these men overtaking and steering from the helm, so 'twas the easiest order to defy when the question asking just what during these hours constituted the greatest catastrophe had met with remedial yet unsteady answer, as civil disobedience was already starting to feel once again like a badge of credited honor and responsibility, as the slippery words distinguished patriotism had met with the definition that was elusive even on the war terrain that was American soil. Patriot true, again a newly rarefied breed against true patriot, pitted when suddenly did both feel one from the other, alienated, even endangered during a time when, quote, 'twas a matter of choosing the less or hell. The easy feeling is, quote, as recently said overseas correspondent Milner Smallman. Do you hears where's I'm coming from with that? Began the man staring at the suspended monitor screen, who would altogether either recoil and inwardly destruct and more proactively climb inside of the television set simultaneously. His eyes flashing indignant, but the aspect only vital, wearing his face only as if he could attest to grappling indecision. The madness to the man, however, whose threat conveyed was scarcely packaged inside of bluff and was an eerie portent extending beyond what his words conveyed. He says, he revived his assistant, backwards tapping against his arm with more force than intended. Hey. I mean, did you catch that hint? So he is somewhere in the Mideast. Against his wishes he leaves a clue. Quote, to which someone quipped sarcastically, quote, the genius deduction. I was thinking he might be in Tahiti, Jamaica, or in the Bahamas, or some other island. Maybe on a raft, and maybe sipping on a martini or daiquiri somewhere. Quote, the cleric Zarid Abdullah Al-Omaini, with a better command of the English language, continued for his associate, adding with a long bony finger outstretched as though ahead of time by the manner in which he bounds it while remaining silent, measuring his words as if discerning from a meter that's needle jut about, thus determining with what concise economy its articulation should sound like and consist of. He cleared his throat and began, quote, you who resist her do constitute the minority, but we see what kind of destructive homicide such a small number is capable of. Suicidal. Really. These American words. So you have the ample grace that is the sufficient warning as the clock is ticking, and you have the opportunity to save your once free homeland and to preserve your very lives for the sake of your little ones. If believing that all is lost for you, line break. Remind you what Ambassador Nasser, who is still at large, has said. That by attacking the line break detainment camps in your mountains and assailing the ambassadors and our United Alliance nations forces, you only wreak havoc and cause a threat for yourself and in your attempt to liberate persons last month from one of the several camps in your stupid move that caused almost all of their lives that were gunned down immediately. With each destruction is a hole punched into the boat, and the wise amongst you may be to remind others that we all are on board. However, we don't like such the fact. Only you can keep the missile locked in its chamber and the countdown begins when this address is over. Or is commenced. However to say. And forthwith. Your nation. Or mine. As one expendable. Could be made a wasteland for jackalls. A cemetery ground. In an instant. Some of you have asked of the whereabouts of who you in actuality elected in unscheduled emergency elections as your incoming president. Alexander Gale Alistar Wentworth, with some reporting that he's in flight overhead, as my assistant said of Benson that the latter is scampering about with his staff underground. Still, while others believe he reported back to Saudi Arabia here and was killed in the explosion. Which, depending on how you decide and what action you take, could mean good news for you. It could mean further elections. Quote, the cleric leaned in and whispered something into Nasser's chief administrator's ear. What did I, the word ellipsis, say? He'd spoken only into his muffling palm. Yes, of course I meant DC. He whispered some indiscernible thing and violently shook his hand toward the man correcting him, ruffling the looping open arm vesture to his long gown, over top of which was a golden-colored torso-hugging vest. Quote, either way, do rest assured that I believe that he and his family is safe on this very moment, and neither of them are available for comment, or he would plead for this war of Americans pinned against Americans to, for the sake of global solidarity, desist. He and his family, among the first ones to vacate, I would imagine, are faring as have we. As the matter of fact, how is it that dash? And just like that, the snowy signal, replete only with the best that distant AM frequency could bring to you, as though from channels of pipe snaking through the ocean while jostling about. It suddenly jostled about and then wavered to a point of severing from the frail audio bandwidth as the white lines transmuted to thick, primal rainbow bands of color as seen during TV and monitor testing. Fractions of seconds elapsing before the video in sheets of diminishing haphazard color and in intervals flicker and then evapor from the screen.
All rights reserved, Eli James,
Certainly ranking
2023.
very
Again,
high on
today's
the
April
list was this
19th,
impromptu airing
2024.
of the lacerating declaration
See
that
you
to its
soon.
host both
Contact
free
412-683-1294.
and post you sounded in cluster.